Your patients will breathe approximately 22,000 times today. Proper posture supports proper breathing patterns. Dysfunctional breathing is a cofactor of illness. Today, you will learn how integrating posture feedback, effortless breathing, and changing internal language reduces GI disorders, anxiety, and head, neck, and shoulder pain. Hi there, I'm Dr. Krista, founder of the American Posture Institute and your host on the Virtual Ergonomics Summit. I'm honored to welcome our next guest presenter. Dr. Eric Pepper, professor at San Francisco State University and director of Biofeedback Health, is an international authority on biofeedback. He has a biofeedback practice and publishes the blog, The Pepper Perspective, sharing ideas on illness, health, and well-being. He co-authored the book Tech Stress, How Technology is Hijacking Our Lives, Strategies for Coping, and Pragmatic Ergonomics. Today, he'll be sharing with us a breath of fresh air, breathing and posture to optimize your health. Dr. Pepper, welcome to the Virtual Ergonomics Summit. Thank you for being with us 2 years in a row. Please take it away.
Well, Krista, thank you so much for sharing, for the kind introduction, more than that. But let me continue for a sec. And really, it is a breath of fresh air. Our posture and breathing is intertwined, and we are unaware how it affects us, unless we have symptoms, shortness of breath, anxiety, neck and back pain, or unless my mother pointed it out, hey, don't slouch, stand up straight. Or when a coworker says, hey, cool down, take a breath before you talk. Or if we use physiological feedback, that means we monitor from the body, which can reflect what the body is doing. But before going on, I like to do a little exercise of each of us to show how mind, body, emotions interact. So what I'd like you to do is just stand up. And as you stand up, adapt a posture where you're fearful, sad, really, hopeless. Adapt that posture. And now evoke a memory where you felt fearful, hopeless, or sad. Just really make it as real as possible. And when you get that memory, just nod your head. Great. Now shift your position and adapt an empowering posture and evoke that positive memory. Really adapt that and make that memory as real as possible. Great. And when you got that memory, you feel it, nod your head. Yes, we got it. All right, good enough. What did you experience? Did you notice when your posture is congruent, you had easier access to memory? Did you notice that you obviously adapted your posture by when you were full of fear or sadness, the body slightly collapsed, you could take that on, or when you were empowered, you opened up and expanded. But were you aware that your breathing changed at the same time? Let me just show that on the slide. So here, you can just see when we are relaxed, our breathing, these are measures of breathing. The second line is your stomach breathing. That means the stomach gets bigger when you inhale and gets smaller when you exhale. That's how the line goes up and down. The pink line on top or the purple line is the chest movement. And then we even look at heart rate. And all we do here is we think of a stressor. Notice our breathing quickens, we tighten our abdomen. And if you looked at the posture, the person would tend to collapse slightly as well. And when they relax again, their breathing can be quiet. That's assuming they could let go of that stressful thought. But remember, in this little exercise, you are really aware of your posture. How many of you were aware that your breathing changed? Your heart rate changed. So let's do the exercise in a different way for a moment. And what I'd like you to do is stand up again. Now I'd like you to once again adopt that posture of fear, of hopelessness, defeat. And now evoke in this position a memory of happiness, empowerment, and joy. Really evoke that. Krista, don't change your posture. Keep being in this hopeless, helpless position. Evoke that. Good enough. Now let go of that. Let it go. You can be up. Now adapt a posture of empowerment, feeling optimistic. And now evoke in this position that memory of hopelessness, fear, defeat, whatever that is. And just think of that. Okay, I think that's enough. I'll let you just. What did you experience? And I think what we saw on the screen is that when Krista was asked to sit in the posture of defeat and fear, she collapsed a bit. And yet the moment she thought of that positive image, she started to change. Notice when we adapt the empowering position, it was hard to think of the hopeless thoughts. When we adapted the empowered position, it was harder to think of the negative thoughts. That is really somewhat important. Keep that in mind. That posture affects it. And we were totally unaware that when we collapsed, our breathing changed. So there are two parts. One is posture. The second is breathing. And let me just show that on the following slide. And here you can see what happens to breathing and posture while standing. Here you stand erect. And notice here's the breathing in the abdomen going in and out easily. Here's when you slouch. Here's when you're erect. The person may be aware that they're slouching, but they have no idea that their breathing is affected. And breathing is very much affected. And what happens now when we spend all our time on screens? Almost no one sits perfectly erect on the screen. We tend to slouch and look forward and this. And we spend at least 7 hours on the screens and many more hours sitting on the couch and looking at entertainment. And what is the effect? Increased depression, anxiety, neck and shoulder pain. And in my recent survey of my students, 85% report experiencing anxiety, 48% neck and shoulder tension, 41% abdominal discomfort. And just this Monday, when I surveyed my students, 45% reported they're already tired and dreading the day when they wake up. So we sit like this the whole day. And in our previous work, remember, we had pointed out that when you slouch and you try to evoke positive memories, it was more difficult, or when you sat up erect, it was harder to evoke negative memories. So that's really congruent. And what is the effect of slouching? So let me just show that for a sec. The effect of slouching we have talked about before. It changes the muscle tension, especially in neck and back. It impacts our moods. We get increased depression, increase in powerlessness, increase in anxiety, even a decrease to blood flow to the head. But what is equally important and hidden for most people, it decreases diaphragmatic breathing, effortless breathing. Think of a baby, how it breathes. The stomach just moves easily in and out. Think of the adult, their stomach has almost no movement. We tend to breathe more in our chest. When do we breathe in our chest more? Often when we're fearful, we go, and then we even have a decrease in the pelvic floor muscle engagements. And our heart rate, instead of going up and down, that's a sign of heart rate variability, and sympathetic, parasympathetic balance now has less variability. And let me show that, for example, over here. And here you can see that what happens to our body once again at the computer. Here we're sitting, collapse, our normal, great intent looking. This is measurement of shoulder tension. This is the measurement of breathing in the chest. This is the measurement of breathing in the abdomen. When you're collapsed, the abdomen is reduced. When you're sitting up, you have more space. It's so impressive to me. Or If you look at the heart rate changes, here you're sitting erect, here you're sitting collapsed. Look at the heart rate. This is the pulse. Here's the heart rate beat by beat. And you notice when the person exhales, the heart rate goes down. When they inhale, the heart rate goes up. Heart rate variability, the sign of health. Now they sit collapsed. But look, here's almost not sitting collapsed at all. That's our normal posture. How we sit on the couch, how we sit in front of computers. Look at the effect. Much less abdominal movement, much less heart rate variability. It is major impact to our health. And this is the other way to think about it. Here we're sitting. I love this picture, which I got by permission by Max Banfield. When we collapse, this is an angle of compression. It isn't just our neck and shoulders, which we so often think about. It increases the pressure in our colon, kidneys, diaphragm, on our ribs. We really have much less movement in this area that affects our digestion, because now all of a sudden there's no movement, and the movement in the abdomen, which occurs when we breathe. When we inhale, the abdomen gets bigger. When we exhale, the abdomen gets smaller, acts as a pump for our venous and lymph return. So it promotes circulation in the abdomen. And what is the result? This is what happened in the past, how women often were in culture. That's the model. But we really do the same thing today when we sat at the computer like this, and now we do it this way. It is a disaster, because what it does in the early 20th century, it caused a disorder called neurasthenia. But it was mainly caused by very shallow chest breathing and a constricted abdomen, which we all do when we sit at the computer collapsed. It was a common disease in the middle and late 19th and early 20th century. And it was obviously related to women because they had mechanical weakness of nerves, etc. It had nothing to do with it. It's because their abdomen was constricted. And what did they experience? Fatigue, anxiety, headaches, heart palpitations, high blood pressure, neuralgias, depression. And these are almost a mimic of what so many people now report sitting at the computer. And if you look at the interaction of breathing and posture, it's a cofactor in psychological illnesses, anxiety, panic, anger, impulse control, stress-related disorders, and physical, chronic pain, headaches, asthma, GI distress, cardiovascular, peripheral circulation, even cold hands, and epilepsy. But let me pause at this moment and let me guide you through an exercise how quickly breathing may change something in you. So in a way, when we are fearful, we often breathe, we go, and then shallow breathe. So I'm going to ask you to do it a little different way just to see what happens. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to inhale normally, not excessively, just normally, and then exhale only about 70% of the previous inhaled air. So you inhale, then you exhale 70%, then you inhale again, you exhale 70%, you inhale again, exhale 70%. Are you ready to do this? Great, start now. So each time you exhale only about 70% of the inhaled air. Keep doing it, keep doing it, keep exhaling only. So each time you exhale less and less. Keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. I think that's enough. And what did you experience? It's so interesting. Most people will experience some form of anxiety or dizziness. It's shocking. Increase in neck and shoulder tension, discomfort. Let me just show that data. It's shocking when people do this. Here we are, lightheadedness, increase in anxiety, neck and shoulder tension, even palpitations, feeling disoriented, blanking out. And if you rate anxiety, for example, which you did with our students, you can see there's a significant increase in the sense of anxiety. All this happened in less than 30 seconds for most people. We really underestimate the power of this. So why do we breathe in our chest? Well, and why do we breathe shallowly? A defense reaction to protect our abdomen, fear, clothing restrictions, our own self-image. Who would ever want to date me if my stomach bubbles out? And response to abdominal pain or injury where I protect myself. And sometimes our social model, I want to be dominant. Instead of allowing oneself to be relaxed and breathe in feeling safe, we breathe high up in our chest. The key is that we are really unaware that we respond this way. We're unaware that we hold our breath and shallow breathe. In fact, it's been called email apnea, as we react to the continual notification by multitasking. We don't have time to come up for air. What we need to do is shift to diaphragmatic breathing under many conditions. Let me just do that on the following slide for a moment. And basically, what you want to do is when you inhale, which is over here, the inhalation occurs because the diaphragm goes down, not the shoulders going up. The diaphragm goes down, allowing the abdomen to expand, the pelvic floor to relax. And then when you exhale, it all constricts without any awareness, without much effort, allowing the air to flow out. And you can just see that becomes a pump in the abdomen, and that allows regeneration and in a way also reduces. If you can see how we can reduce that. But how do we recognize slouching and shallow breathing? Well, we want to train people to breathe slowly, about 6 breaths a minute. And then we want to use the cue of awareness whenever you hold your breath or shallow breathe, or when you start collapsing, to breathe lower and slower. It seems so easy to do. And here's an example of one of the people doing this. Here they're breathing very easily. Notice the abdomen is going in and out, gets bigger when the line goes up. The inhale gets smaller when they exhale. The chest is really totally relaxed. Now they think of the stressor or something happens. Their breathing changes. They're becoming aware of that. At that moment, they say, I go back to slow breathing. And they get calmer almost instantaneously. It is not, the challenge is, it takes time to do. It's mastery training. We don't know it. And then finally, we can become aware of our posture collapse by using devices that remind us when we slouch. Here's one example, because I never know that I slouch. I'm unaware that I start breathing in my chest. So now I'm reminded to sit up, and the cue of that, when I slouch, you see, it makes me then the unaware aware. Here's the good example of it. I sit erect. This is using the camera of my computer that now analyzes instantaneously when I'm slouching. And each time I slouch, it gives me a signal either visually or auditorily, and I can adjust that, and then I can do changes. It gives me the opportunity to identify to what I collapse to the ergonomics, to negative thoughts, to being tired, to stress, breath holding, whatever they may be. And then when I get that cue, what do? I'm going to sit up. And now, because I've been coached and taught lower, slower diaphragmatic breathing, for example, you take a breath, for example, put your hands on your lower abdomen, make yourself exhale, making a sound, psss. And then as the air is out, let the abdomen widen like a giant balloon, 360 degrees, as if the air is just pulled in by itself. Then you can pause almost, and then exhale again. Ideally, you want to do it through your nose. Okay. So you want to breathe lower and slower. You want to change your posture. And then if you have negative thoughts, you transform the negative thoughts. It's so much easier when you shift from being collapsed and you have negative thoughts. Wait a minute, I'm going to get up. And then I breathe. And then it's easier to have a different viewpoint. And when people do this, what they do in our research studies is something very interesting. So they are practicing with a device like this, and that teaches them awareness. It gives them the opportunity to change. It makes the unfelt felt. It makes the invisible visible. It makes the unaware aware. And they notice, gosh, I have less eye discomfort. I have less shoulder pain. I have less back pain. I'm even less depressed, less anxious. And I love the last one. It's the wrong measure. It's called unmotivated. I become less unmotivated. More motivated. And so then let me talk about one young woman to end with this, who had essentially a chronic headache condition. She came this September to my class. It was the first day of class. She comes up to me and says, Dr. Pepper, I have a severe headache. I have this I have this about the last 14 years, 2 or 3 times a week. The doctor calls it migraines. I take 2 to 10 Excedrin tablets a week to deal with this. And I looked at her and I noticed she was slightly slouched. She was breathing shallow in her chest. Wait a minute. So then I said, okay, just come here. So I taught her to sit up more. She had to loosen her clothing a little bit, her waist. Then taught her how to do diaphragmatic breathing really slow. And she was lucky that she did not have any abdominal insults in the past. So she could do that. She breathed really lower. And then she sat back in the class. And as she did that, her pain decreased. It was most interesting. We then also happened to show in class how our muscles in her shoulders were involved. Because when you breathe in your chest, you go, and then you hold this tension going up. Yet she was totally unaware that she was doing it. She didn't know it. That was the key. But then she learned to become aware of that. She kept breathing lower. And synchronistically for this class, their laboratory practice was at home to use that kind of posture feedback on the camera. And she installed it on our computer. She did it 2 to 6 hours a day. So every time she caught herself slouching, whether because she felt tired, she felt overwhelmed by work, whatever, she had negative thoughts, she would use the feedback. She would sit up, focus on breathing, get herself reoriented, change her work. Oh, and then what was the result? Let me show you the final ending of this, because to me, it's always so impressive in a clinical example. It sounds so magical. It is magical in a way, and not magical at all. It takes lots of work. It takes integration in daily life. It takes awareness. But just look for her. After 2 weeks, remember, she had 14 years of chronic headaches with medications, treatment, totally unsuccessful. Her shoulder pain went significantly down. Her back pain basically disappeared. Her depression, as she self-rated it, this is a self-rating, obviously, she didn't feel it. She was less anxious, and her motivation significantly improved. She became less unmotivated. That makes sense, because if you have pain and are uncomfortable, it's harder to just get your act together. And what did she do again? She shifted posture and practiced the lower breathing. That meant also her hands became warmer. Her digestion improved. It takes lots of training to do that. And as she said, although it was distracting to be reminded all the time about my posture, it did decrease my neck pain. With the pain reduction, I was able to sit at the computer longer and felt motivated. Ever since using it, my posture during the day has been better, even when reading while commuting on the bus. Now I hold my cell phone up and I breathe lower. And as she said, I have not used Excedrin since the beginning of the study. And as she knew about Excedrin being harmful for the liver, she smiled and said, my liver must be very happy. And when I now feel tension, I do many different things. I use it as a trigger to shift my posture, to shift to lower breathing and evoke more positive framing. Okay. And how can you use these concepts with your clients? Well, when clients come and they may be depressed or hopeless, Do not ask them to start changing their thoughts right away. First, ask them to shift their position, teach them slower diaphragmatic breathing that they can do, and then teach them ways to reframe their negative thoughts. And when you do that, it is so much more effective, as our research has shown, which I can show in this final slides of this. And you can see when we do this in a large study of 145 people, when they combine the posture, breathing, and changing internal language, they reduce their negative thoughts, anxiety, and tension much more than when they just only try to activate their brain by thinking. We really underestimate the power of the breath and the posture. And finally, and in the summary, respiration are the mind-body-emotion bridge. Mind emotions affect body posture and breathing. Body posture and breathing affects mind and emotion. Thus, be more erect. Breathe lower and slower diaphragmatically without any effort to optimize health. Use the biofeedback to make the invisible visible, and use the biofeedback variables to enhance the awareness and integrate new patterns in your life. For any questions, some of it is in our book, and you may want to look at our blog called pepperperspective.com that also covers much of this material.
Dr. Pepper, thank you so much for this brilliant presentation. And I do want to encourage everybody to be sure to check out your blog and definitely get that book as a wonderful resource to follow the great work that you're doing. Now, I'm going to do a quick summary and then a couple of questions for you. So you began by discussing posture and breathing is intertwined, and you gave some great examples to demonstrate that. And as you guys were listening, I hope you had the chance to do the demonstrations yourself. And of course, we can show these to our patients so they can actually feel the combination of breathing, posture, and how this impacts our empowering or more depressing thoughts. And when posture is congruent, have easier memory recall, positive memories, breathing and heart rate also changes. Posture changes when we adapt empowering thoughts. And when we collapse, our breathing changes, and it's more easy to develop negative memory recall. And time spent on screens. So this has certainly, tech stress has absolutely skyrocketed in the digital age, and especially in this post-pandemic world. We're seeing time spent on screens of over 7 hours per day. And this is leading to increased depression, neck and back pain, anxiety, abdominal discomfort. People are feeling tired and dreading the day before they even get started. And the effects of slouching are changes in muscle tension, impacts on mood and cognition, feeling powerlessness, decrease in blood flow to the head, changes in breathing and heart rate patterns, decrease abdominal breathing. As we collapse forward, there's less space in the abdomen, decreased pelvic floor muscle engagement, and reduced heart rate variability. You showed a great example with the image of the angle of compression. And we see that angle of compression, it's demonstrating that collapsed posture. So we're seeing increased pressure on the internal organs, impacting digestion, decreased lymph circulation. And then you gave a great example of the corsets that women were wearing in previous times. And as a result of this, because we were restricting movement of the abdomen, seeing neurasthenia, which is shallow chest breathing. So we had a restricted abdomen, we had mechanical weakness of the nerves, and resulting in fatigue, anxiety, headaches, neuralgia, all kinds of symptoms from this. And what we can conclude as we look back is that by restricting the abdomen and having shallower chest breathing, it's leading to these symptoms. And although many women aren't still wearing these type of corsets, we are emulating this with the postures that we're sitting in. And we're emulating this by tucking in, by trying to show dominance, so having shallow chest breathing, or by tucking in the tummy to appear skinnier, to appear thinner, for example, in a picture, or just in a social gathering. And so you gave another example of breathing, and you feel, which was the 70% exhalation. And if anybody was doing that, I was starting to feel stressed out on my side as I was doing it, that feeling of anxiety as you're trying to reach for more air. And unfortunately, as we have shallow respiration, this is increasing anxiety. When you combine this with too much time time on screens, and a collapsed posture, all of this is leading to mental health issues as well as pain and suffering for our patients. And then breathing in our chest, as an example, again, showing dominance, tucking in the tummy, and multitasking. So as our patients are doing these things, they don't realize it, but they're creating that chest breathing. We've got to shift them to diaphragmatic respiration. As they exhale, there's diaphragmatic relaxation. And how to recognize, so train them to breathe slower, about 6 breaths per minute, use breath holding and changing their posture to be erect. And then feedback makes the unaware aware. Thank you for showing that example of biofeedback, because it reminds us when we're slouching. Because unfortunately, if we, our patients may have the best intentions. They come in because they have pain. They want to correct their posture. And while they're in your office, they'll be demonstrating good posture. They'll be diaphragmatic breathing. But the moment they leave your office and they get back in their car and they go back into a flex position, they go back to their computer in this flex position, we've got to retrain their posture habits to maintain the great work that you're doing in office, to make those true shifts so that they really do change their posture and their breathing patterns. So identifying, ergonomics, negative thoughts, tiredness, stress, and breath holding as triggers. And then what to do is to sit up and look up, breathe lower and slower, transform negative thoughts to empowering thoughts, and of course, more movement throughout the day. A great example to utilize for biofeedback being the Upright desktop app, and then how to use these concepts. So when they're depressed, thank you for mentioning this. I thought this was really brilliant and well said. If a patient is feeling anxious or if they're feeling depressed, focus instead first on focusing just on the language and changing their thoughts, but shift first their position and their breathing to set them up for success. So when you include things like language and shifting those thought patterns, then they're in a position, they're embodying the position to be successful with that shift of mindset. Respiration and posture are the mind-body-emotion bridge, and mind and emotion impact posture, and posture affects mind and emotions. Dr. Pepper, we always love learning from you. Thank you so much again for contributing to us today. A couple of questions for you before we wrap up. Number one, I wanted to know, when you were doing your research study, what was, you gave a great example of the individual case study and then showing the results from multiple students. Now, I agree with you. When we change posture, you can see that patients instantly have a change. It instantly changes their physiology. They instantly feel better in many cases. When you were looking at the overall impact of all of this, the students that you had studied, what was that time frame where they started to show less pain? They started to show, ability to, they started feeling more motivated, less brain fog, all of the things that they started to have impact with. Was it immediate, and how long did it take overall to start seeing those long-term effects?
It's a very good question. And obviously, like working with any clients, it's always individual. The real key is how often you really do it, that sense of awareness. For the students, we notice these changes easily in 2 weeks. You see some of these physiological changes and cognitive changes. And the case example I gave was really most surprising, because she did it the first day. However, she kept doing it like 4 to 6 hours a day, where she kept interrupting. When people do this, we have a remarkable success rate. If a student just does it because it's an assignment, very limited success. The key is to integrate into your world. And that's the most challenging piece to do, because I get captured and then I don't remember, or I say, oh, well, it's not worth it. I want to finish this work. No, it's just like getting up. If you get up every half an hour and move for a moment, you have much more energy it takes training and coaching and commitment. So when students do it as a home practice and a homework, we have fairly good success, because at least they're going to do it because it's semi-required for a grade or for an experiment. It is impressive. I'm in awe of them, that for many people, especially those who have I would say it's almost more tech stress related, it changes. In addition, we have found with students in about 2 to 8 weeks, if they practice this and they have irritable bowel, they have acid reflux, and we have published those, and they really do this, they need to change both their clothing. They need to let their outlet, they need to shift posture, they need to breathe lower, and then they need to identify that their stressor occurs. And use that as the cue to shift back, to accept. It's like an acceptance, what is, and then take the opportunity to change. And when we have done that, and that was published, we noticed that these students in about 4 to 8 weeks, their gastrointestinal distress, their acid reflux really decreased. Because think of acid reflux. If you squeeze the stomach, almost the stomach gastric acids and fluids are being pushed up. And that's what happens when I'm in this angle of compression. If, on the other hand, I can let my abdomen be widened and really let go, then that doesn't occur as easily and allows more healing to occur. So it is possible, and it can be very quick sometimes. However, it takes practice. It doesn't do any good if you do it once a day and then you forget about it.
Yeah.
If you do it most of the time, and that's what the feedback can be helpful for, to remind you. And then your own motivation. So take a chart, mark it down. How often did you become aware of your stressor? How often did you interrupt? And slowly the awareness goes up, your interruption goes up, and then over time, your symptoms significantly go down. And we have follow-up on these students for 2 or 3 years. And when they have done that, their symptoms has continued to be maintained.
That is absolutely brilliant. And so when working with patients in a clinical perspective, the American Posture Institute, we recommend a 3-component system, which is spinal alignment, posture rehabilitation, and posture habit reeducation. So what you're doing in office would be spinal alignment and rehabilitation. And then adding that posture habit reeducation component, continuing to follow up with them and making sure that they have the ergonomics and the biofeedback set up in a place to help them change those posture habits. Because if they do change those posture habits long-term, as Dr. Pepper just mentioned, you can see that they maintain less symptoms and symptom severity over time to help them have improved health, both from a mental and physical perspective. Dr. Pepper,
but I would,
go ahead.
If I added a piece to that, I would say that breathing is critical. Yes. Because breathing really is the boundary, or the driver to a large extent, or the response to, it's not clear which is which always, of sympathetic, parasympathetic activity. So if you quickly gasp, and anybody could do this, if you quickly gasp and take your pulse, you see the pulse goes up for many people, and then you slowly exhale, the pulse goes down. In our driven world, we tend to almost be gasped and stay high up. And that is that chronic sympathetic arousal that is such a cofactor in so many illnesses. Now, if you teach the person to exhale again and breathe slower and lower, you are reestablishing the sympathetic parasympathetic balance, and the number of chronic illnesses decrease significantly.
Amazing. And one final question for you. When you're doing your patient education and when you're working with your study groups, do you do these demonstrations to them so they can actually feel it as a way for them to feel and understand so that they can recognize it better when they go back to work, when they go back to their typical workspaces? What does that education process look like?
As an educational process, we almost always include, I would say, somatic or cognitive practice, and they usually have 2 parts. One is to make the person worse, and the other is to make them better so they can have a personal choice. And you saw one with the shallow breathing, this what I call 70% exhalation. We could follow it up with very slow diaphragmatic breathing, and they would see, the symptoms disappear. Now you have a choice. The other part of it we often call symptom prescription. You purposely try to adapt what you're doing and make it worse. And then you can see how you can increase your discomfort. If you can teach a person to increase their discomfort, that is as powerful as making it better. Then they know there's a possibility to change. All I need to do, and it sounds so simple, so challenging to do, is to not do that habit pattern.
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you. And by bringing that to their attention, they can feel it, they can experience it. And of course, they want to go away from pain and work towards symptom reduction. As we wrap up another great session on the Virtual Ergonomics Summit, I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Eric Pepper for his excellent work in the field of ergonomics and really pioneering posture research. And to all of our listeners, I'd like to acknowledge you. Thank you for showing up eager to learn more and to help more corporate clients have safer workplaces. I'm Dr. Krista, your host on the Virtual Ergonomics Summit. Be sure to get the Ergo Super Pack for ongoing summit access and tools for simple ergonomic implementation to see more corporate clients. Stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next Ergonomic Masterclass.